Ever since Russiagate became the number one story that the establishment loves to pontificate about, I've been warning everybody that calling on Silicon Valley oligarchs to filter news isn't the right answer. Because basically you're begging for censorship. You're begging for a curator who you fundamentally cannot trust. Well, now it's time for me to say I told you so. So according to Vice News, take a look at this. Facebook reveals the untrustworthy way it ranks news outlets for trust. So that headline is actually a little misleading because they didn't release how they rank news outlets. Well, actually, they did release how they rank news outlets. They didn't release what the rankings are. So what they divulged is that it's done by a user poll. That's how they determine, what gets play on their site and what doesn't. It's done basically by user poll. Now, it's hilarious that they think that, this is the way to do it. Like, what? No. Just because a bunch of people think X, Y, or Z is the case doesn't mean it is the case. So, perfect example, in the lead up to the Iraq War, the entire media narrative was weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein has them, he's an imminent threat to us, even he was in bed with Al-Qaeda. That was another majority-held belief in mainstream media. Now, if you poll people at the time, they would still say, yeah, the most trusted name of news is like CNN. But they were objectively, empirically, factually wrong about what they were saying. And this happens all the time. So, just because something is majority held doesn't mean it is by definition correct and not fake news. And that's the problem that you're setting up here. If you say, okay, we'll let you guys rank the news and what's acceptable and what's not, well, then another problem that you'll encounter is by its very nature and the way the system is functioning, you can't have new outlets come onto the scene. Because if it's a new outlet, nobody's heard of it, so they can't rank it as any more trustworthy or less trustworthy than any other outlet, but they never break through. How the fuck is a random new website gonna compete with CNN in a poll where they're going by user opinion on the site? They can't get their foot in the door, so they can't be judged. So, this, you know what this is? This manifests as nothing but an establishment bias. That's all this is. It doesn't matter that mainstream media downplayed, for example, the WikiLeaks information, the DNC email leaks, even though those were all true and they'd exposed how the primary was rigged. It doesn't matter that mainstream media downplayed that, to an absurd extent. Facebook says that our users say mainstream media is still trustworthy even when they're pushing stories that are not true. The Syria thing recently, all the fucking outlets praising Trump for doing the bombing. That happens every time he bombs Syria. They're pushing this idea based on no evidence whatsoever that Assad definitely gassed his own people. All this stuff is up in the air and should be questioned and can be questioned. But because people have already said, hey, we generally trust that name, CNN, therefore they're going to get, the ability to have their stuff spread around a lot more than anybody questioning that narrative, even if the people questioning the narrative are correct. It is a built-in establishment bias. And also, they absolutely obliterated many outlets that had built their entire business model and their livelihood around Facebook. Thankfully, Secular Talk, we're more YouTube. Now, I say thankfully, not really thankfully, because YouTube is still cracking down on independent news outlets, and they've done it repeatedly, and we all know this, and we've discussed this in detail. But Facebook is even worse in that they just basically overnight decided, yeah, the algorithm's not going to care at all about independent news outlets that don't have a big enough name yet, and so they just fucking destroy their business model like that. So all the fucking idiots who love, and this is happening a lot in Democratic circles now, where they say, do something, Mark Zuckerberg. Russia, fake news, Russia. Now, one of the things that crowd views as fake news are the DNC leaks. They think it's damn near criminal that WikiLeaks released that information, even though it's all true and even though it exposes corruption, because something, it affects the election and Vladimir Putin would like it. So they're begging Mark Zuckerberg to filter your news and censor stuff. Why the fuck would you trust Mark Zuckerberg's judgment? Why would you trust his judgment? But that's what the Democrats are calling for, and mainstream media loves this idea because Zuckerberg will obviously give CNN and people like that all the credibility in the world, and their stuff will get prioritized. We have noticed this to an extent on YouTube. Those videos trend like nobody's business. Secular talk videos have never trended ever. It could be a super popular video that we release. It could get 100,000 views in a day. Never would a secular talk video trend. Meanwhile, a shitty CNN video with 3,000 views in a day, they make that trend and boom, it's got 200,000 views like that. So it all goes back to the algorithms, and they're always going to bias the algorithms in favor of legacy establishment corporate media, and that's a goddamn shame, and we've been warning you about this from day one, and now everything we've said is coming to pass.